Aside from being a rabbi here at Bet Tzedek, my side rabbi gig is being the Mara de-atra of Camp Ramah in Canada. Currently, nobody on the Hanhala, the senior staff team, has rabbinic ordination, so I was tapped a few years ago for the role of being the halakhic authority for Camp Ramah. Both obscure and very complicated halakhic questions come to me, and I get them by phone, by email, or most frequently during the summer months, by WhatsApp at very random hours of the day. And this is not uncharted territory for me. I know how to do it. For 10 years, I was Mara de-atra when I served my community in Queens, New York, but here at Bet Tzedek, this is Reb Steve's domain, and quite frankly, Rabbi Lara and I are grateful that it's your domain. Right? Okay, yeah. An example of a question this summer was, a camper is having a bat mitzvah at camp. The father's family is not Jewish. He is, but his family isn't. And could these family members open the ark? I said no, but for this occasion, how about adding a prayer for Canada or a prayer for peace to include these family members? All good, that's what happened. Another example had to do with a new shulchan, a new Torah reading table that had no cover. We have that beautiful blue cover there on that new shulchan. So this was a little easier. I suggested, why don't you just use a white tablecloth until someone donates something nicer? To give kavod to a Torah, it shouldn't go right down on the table. And guess what happened when I got into that room? There was a white tablecloth. As the Mara de-atra of Camp Ramah in Canada, I'm pretty much guaranteed that if schedules permit, I can spend about a week up there as visiting rabbi. And I just did, and it was wonderful, and it was so hot, but it was amazing. And I found it to be amazing because what I encountered at Camp Ramah and what we find at all Jewish sleepover camps is 24/7 Jewish life and living. From daily tefillah, age appropriate, to the extensive use of Hebrew, to hatikva every day at flagpole, that's new for those of you who went there in the past, to someone finishing learning a tractate of Talmud so people could eat meat during the 9 days preceding Tisha B'Av and explaining that's why they finished the tractate so people could eat meat during the 9 days when we usually eat dairy. That came across? Yeah, okay. To everyone being able to keep Shabbos, to daily Jewish learning, to observing kids in their downtime practicing chanting a few verses from Megillat Eicha, to hearing modern Israeli music more than any other music genre, Ramah is an incubator for Jewish life and living. And we Jews, that's what we value. We come across this concept frequently in our biblical texts and then later sources. In this week's parsha, in Vayetchanan, in chapter 4, we read, Va'ata Yisrael, shma et hachukim ve'et hamishpatim asher anochi melamed etchem la'asot, lema'an tichyu. And now, people Israel, give heed or pay attention to the laws and the rules that I am instructing you to observe so that you may live. We also read at the end of chapter 5, be careful then, do as Hashem commanded you, do not turn to the right or to the left, follow only the path that God has given you, lema'an tichyun v'tov lachem, that you may live and that it will be good for you. We don't just read this in this week's parsha. Back in Vayikra in 18, Ushmartem et chukotai ve'et mishpatai asher ya'aseh otam ha'adam v'chai bahem. God says, you, us, keep my mitzvot, keep my rules, so that human beings shall live. And probably the most famous example is what we will read in a few weeks. Ha'idoti bachem hayom et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz ha'chayim ve'hamavet natati lefanecha habracha ve'haklala uvacharta b'chayim. Choose life. So we value life and living, and we value it so much that our Torah is called an Eitz Chaim. But sometimes, while we might be experiencing life, we aren't really living. Maybe we're just going through the motions. Or maybe life is so hard that we're just getting by. Imagine you are 14 or 15 years old and you live in Sderot, Israel. You're in the Negev, and your city is a kilometer away from a hostile neighbor, the northern Gaza Strip, the town of Beit Hanun. Your grandparents probably left or were forced to leave a country that no longer wanted Jews. And you were born after your own parents lived through and survived Operation Cast Lead. That was the 3 weeks in late 2008 and early 2009 in which 571 rockets and 205 mortar shells, they landed in Israeli territory with 50 and 60 rockets fired at Sderot each week, which caused about half the city's residents to temporarily evacuate. So your parents, they live with trauma. And your reality consists of indoor playgrounds, shelters at every bus stop, and philanthropic dollars from Toronto and other cities, enriching and supporting and sustaining you in countless ways. And maybe your family lives in Sderot because your parents work for OSEM. That's the company that makes Bamba and Beasley. And maybe you live in Sderot because your parents work for the Menorah Candle Factory. Or maybe they work for Nestle, which also has a huge headquarters there. Or maybe they work in high tech and work from home. But whatever brought your family to Sderot, your family lives in a part of a country that is under constant fear of attack. And if you are 14 or 15 years old, then on the Simchat Torah, right around your bar mitzvah, you experienced your own trauma. Because on that day, 18 members of the Sderot Israeli police were murdered by Hamas terrorists in a terrible battle. And 20 others of your neighbors were murdered by Hamas terrorists on that day. And of the 36,000 residents of your city, 90% were evacuated during the days after October 7th. And maybe you spent months in a hotel in Eilat or elsewhere in the country. And if you're 14 or 15 years old, from October 2023 until March 2024, you were displaced. You didn't go to school. The participants of the Bet Tzedek March 2024 Israel mission are eyewitnesses to this, as most of us spent money in a Judaica shop that had literally just reopened, and they were putting away their Sukkot inventory in March. Welcome to your teenage years. So if we add their trauma plus their generational trauma plus hormones, you get the 20 kids that I met at Camp Ramah last week as part of a program called Campers Together. 10 girls, 10 boys, 2 madrichim, staff people, and 1 mental health professional. The 20 teens that I met are part of a cohort of 700 Israelis who are spending 2-week stints at various North American Jewish overnight camps this summer. There's also another 20 from Sderot who are at Camp Shalom. This is from the Jewish Agency's website. In 2024, the Jewish Agency and Mosaic United launched Campers Together to support traumatized Israeli youth and teens impacted by the horrors of October 7 and boost their resilience. Through the program, young Israelis living in the shadow of the conflict experienced a healing respite like no other and formed powerful connections as they attended Jewish overnight camps around the world. So while at Camp Ramah last week, I was fortunate to have 2 extensive experiences with the Campers Together kids. The first was in Omanut, in art, and it was just the girls. It was laid back, it was calm, and I asked them questions about their life in Sderot and what they needed to do to get on the program, what was the process like. They paid a nominal fee just to ensure they'd participate, and for a bunch of them, more than half, it was their first time on an airplane and they went really far, and all the while these girls were needle pointing. It was lovely. The second time, I met with the entire group, boys and girls, and the goal was to answer questions about conservative Judaism and the landscape of Canadian Jewry. The very first question was asked to me by a boy in a tone that might not have been so menschy, and he said to me, "At menichat tefillin? Do you put on tefillin?" And my response with a smile was, "Lo b'Shabbat v'chagim," not on Shabbat and holidays. So most of these kids from this cohort were Mizrahi Jews. And they had no clue about Ashkenazi customs or cultures, never mind diaspora Judaism. They thought that our Sifrei Torah were wrong, not different. They're used to the big Sephardic kind of Torahs. They thought our tefillah and the words that we do include or don't include were wrong, not different. And they thought that women wrapping tefillin was asur, katuv b'Torah. It was wrong. It says so in the Torah. Women can't wrap tefillin. Not different. But I was calm, so it didn't get heated. But one of their madrichim, who previously had been a shinshinit in San Diego, kept saying over and over again to these kids, "Yeda ze koach." Knowledge is power. And she kept telling them, they need to know about other kinds of Jews because we are all one people. Now, you might have thought that I would have been upset by what could have been seen as an attack by the Camper Together boys, but I wasn't at all. First, I had the yeda, I had the knowledge, so I had the power. And second, though, what I took away from this is that 14-year-old boys from Israel, from Sderot, with all of their trauma, were kind of the same as the Nachshonim boys at camp. Lots of testosterone. 14-year-old boys. Wow. Despite the trauma and the hardship that they experienced, in my opinion, with my social work hat on, not my rabbi hat on, developmentally, they were exactly where they should have been. I was so moved by this program that I got in contact with Willie Kleinbaum, who is UJA Toronto's managing director of Israel and Overseas, who lives in Israel. And when we spoke earlier this week, he told me that a goal of Campers Together is to create a sense of, he trademarked this word, yachadness. That's his word, which means a sense of a larger togetherness. And one example of this was that the Ramah Nachshonim kids and the same-aged Israelis, they worked together to build a yellow planter boxes that were shaped into a yellow ribbon and decorated with the names of the remaining hostages, the Batman symbol for the Bibas family, Am Yisrael Chai, and more. And later, the youngest campers, the Rishonim, They began planting this week in this garden, which really is a growing reminder of resilience and memory and connection. Hopefully, by participating in Campers Together, these kids will be able to experience post-traumatic growth by realizing that they are part of something bigger. The Campers Together program enables these kids from Sderot and other impacted communities to truly live in a space full of Jewish joy and Jewish living. And that's what hit me last Shabbat afternoon during outdoor mincha, staring at Skeleton Lake, when I heard the words, "V'ata Yisrael, shma et hachukim, ve'et hamishpatim, asher anochi melamed etchem la'asot lema'an tichyu." Do these mitzvahs so that you can live. The Judaism that we've inherited is a tradition that values life. And the quality of life in Sderot is not optimal right now. And so the larger global Jewish community, showcasing the value of achdut, or yachadness, of unity, has spoken and will continue to speak with our dollars and create opportunities for tomorrow's leaders to live well, and to encounter other Jewish kids who are nothing like them, and yet completely like them. I salute the dreamers and the donors of Campers Together. We need more initiatives like this, lema'an tichyu, so that we can live. Shabbat Shalom.